I'll just read out the motion. The motion requesting the meeting is pursuant to Standing Order and Local Government legislation. The following members of Dublin City Council request the Lord Mayor to convene a special meeting of the City Council to assess and debate the implications of the recent An Bord Pleanála decision regarding the lands east of St Paul's School for Z15 zoned lands across the city and the development plan. Councillors O'Murray, Heaney, Horgan-Jones, Mahon, O'Farrell and O'Moore. And we've this evening received a motion, which I'll just read into the record as well, that this City Council, as a matter of urgency, takes all possible steps, including seeking leave for a judicial review, to reinforce the primacy of the 2016 to 2022 City Development Plan as the plan for our city in response to An Bord Pleanála's recent decision regarding Z15 lands, reference ABP 300559-18, and it's by the same councillors. Okay.
Okay, first of all, I'll bring in the Planning Executive, John O'Hara.
Thank you, Ardvera. Just by way of background, councillors, with regard to land east of St Paul's College, Raheny, on the 28th of March, An Bord Pleanála, under the Strategic Housing Development legislation, granted planning permission for 536 residential units, i.e. 104 houses and 432 apartments, on this 6.4 hectare site. The site is zoned for Z15 purposes in the City Development Plan for institutional and community purposes. A separate planning application for 2 all-weather playing pitches and a sports hall was refused permission by the Planning Authority on the 27th of March, and there has been no notification to date of an appeal with regard to that. As part of the process, on the 26th of February, the Chief Executive submitted a report to An Bord Pleanála as required by the SHD legislation and following consultations with the Area Committee. In essence, while the Chief Executive's report considered the provisions of housing accommodation to be acceptable in principle, refusal was recommended on the grounds that the proposed development lacked detail in relation to timetables for the use of the playing fields, and that it had not been demonstrated that the proposal secures the retention of the main community uses, including space for the expansion of such uses on the lands. The planning report from the City Council concluded that there was indeed a shortfall in the 25% publicly open space, in that only 18.7% was provided. Furthermore, the Chief Executive's report was not satisfied that the proposed development would maintain the favourable condition for light-bellied Brent geese, and it was not satisfied that it would not affect the integrity of the North Bull SPA, a special protection area. However, the Inspector and the Board reached different conclusions from those of the Planning Authority in their interpretation of development plan policy and environmental considerations. In essence, the Board took the view that the institutional zoning objective related to the wider Z15 lands, including St Paul's College. This view was supported by the Department of Education, which indicated it had no objection to the proposal. In relation to the 25% open space objective, the Board was of the view that the shortfall could be compensated for by a 1,000 square metre gym and community facilities and the amount of recreational lands in the locality, including St Anne's Park. This included site visit to St Anne's Park by the Inspector, which showed that not all the pitches were in use, albeit based on one observation on the 25th of February at 1 p.m. Condition 23 of the Board's decision requires a Section 48 financial contribution to be made to the Planning Authority in lieu of the shortfall of open space. With regard to the Brent geese issue, the Board carried out an appropriate assessment and concluded that the proposed development, either by itself or in combination with other development in the vicinity, is not likely to have any impact on the integrity of the European sites. It was further concluded by the Board that because there are some 132 feeding areas for Brent geese across the Dublin area, that there was capacity for the feeding areas to absorb the loss of that feeding area on the St Paul's site. It is obvious that the Planning Authority and the Board have taken an entirely different interpretation of the weight to be given to the various aspects of development plan policy in this particular case. In this respect, there are two areas which need to be considered. One, whether there are grounds for judicial review, and two, whether the policy objectives in the development plan need to be reviewed in relation to the institutional and community uses. With regard to the first issue, the validity of a decision taken by the Board may only be questioned by making an application for judicial review pursuant to Section 50, 50A and 50B of the Planning and Development Act 2000 and Order 84 of the Rules of Superior Courts, SA No. 15 of 1986. It should be noted, members, that any challenge taken by way of judicial review may question only the validity of the decision, and the courts do not adjudicate on the merits of the development from the perspective of the proper plan and sustainable development of the area. Section 50A(3) further states that leave for judicial review shall not be granted unless the court is satisfied that there are substantial grounds for contending that the decision is invalid or ought to be quashed, and that the applicant has sufficient interest in the matter which is the subject of the application, involving environmental impact assessment and is a body complying with these criteria. This indeed is a high bar that any applicant must cross in order to seek leave from the High Court to challenge a decision of the planning authority. In this particular case, whilst there are different interpretations of planning policy, it is concluded that there are no reasonable grounds for taking a judicial review against An Bord Pleanála. With regard to the second issue, development plan policy for said 15 lands, it is noted that the current wording takes account of the High Court judgment No. 56 of 2011, which found that there were insufficient planning reasons to justify removing residential from open for consideration in all cases. At present, the Z15 zoning objective in the development plan requires that any proposed housing development shall be required to demonstrate, and I'll quote from it, councillors, demonstrate how the proposal is to be in accordance with and assists in securing the aims of the zoning objective, how it secures the retention of the main institutional and community uses on the lands, including space for any necessary expansion of such uses, how it secures the retention of existing functional open space, e.g. school playing fields, and the manner in which the nature and scale of the proposal integrates with the surrounding lands. In addition, the 25% area must show how the space will be designed to protect existing sporting and recreational uses that are available predominantly for community use. It would appear that the main reason for the difference in interpretation of this policy between the Planning Authority and the Board is due to policy considerations and local circumstances, including the proximity of St Anne's Park. Each proposal on Z15 lands must be assessed on its own particular merits. The Planning Authority is not opposed in principle to the delivery of high-quality residential development on this part of St Paul's, subject to the satisfactory resolution of the zoning objective and biodiversity issues. The provision of 500 plus residential units in an area well served with public transport and with a range of community facilities is in accordance with the broader and higher level policies aimed at addressing the housing crisis that are included in the development plan. Given the above considerations, the Chief Executive is minded not to initiate GR proceedings against An Bord Pleanála in this case. Having said of all of that, councillors, it may be prudent to ascertain the legal opinion as to whether there are any further options or refinements of Z15 policy which may be made, which will ensure community facilities on institutional lands are retained insofar as legally possible. Thank you, Chair.
So, in accordance with precedent, what I will do is I'll take each councillor that had signed the original motion for the special meeting 3 minutes, and then we'll go through by party. Councillor Nisha Murray.
Firstly, I just want to thank you for agreeing to convene the meeting, and I want to thank all councillors that have come in here tonight to debate this issue, because you know, on the face of it, it looks quite technical, but fundamentally councillors that have been here long enough know that Z15 is an issue And the tensions around Z15 is an issue that has been around here a long time, and it is vital that we bottom out the implications of An Bord Pleanála's decision for Z15. St Anne's happens to be one particular case, and it's probably the case that has brought this decision about, but we need to look at it across the city. So that's why we're having this debate today. I hear what the manager seems to be saying is that he's not recommending a judicial review of this decision by An Bord Pleanála, but instead maybe changing our development plan to reflect something else. I don't buy that dynamic at all. I think that is the wrong approach. I think this chamber sets a development plan for the city. That development plan has primacy over everything else, and I think we should be doing everything we can in this chamber to reinforce the primacy of a development plan, which is actually one of the main reasons we stand for office and we get elected as councillors. And one of our core functions is to debate, vary, tease out, review and approve a development plan. So I just want to make a few comments. My issue with all of this is very much around Z15, and it's within the motion, but just a few things to give a little chronology to members on it. So, I mean, the strategic housing development is quite a convoluted process, but there are pre-planning and pre-planning consultations, and I just want to read out a specific note which appears in handwritten format on a note from those pre-planning consultations, and I quote, "The applicant needs to demonstrate that lands are surplus to requirements of schools/clubs now and into the future." And this is a piece of land. These Z15 lands, a particular case out in St Anne's, is a set of lands that has been used by clubs, the school, and major sporting clubs in the area for years. So they have been using this, nurseries, games, and they have had access to use. That's an established community use. And this is the point, from my perspective, that it is as good an example as you get as a nailed down established community use of those lands. Okay, and it's been there a long time. It's Z15 because we as councillors, we're looking to protect these lands and to keep them available for community use. Established, I quote, established community use. That's what it is. Okay, so the issue was raised as far back when I think this is March 2017. The date of the meeting held on the 8th of March 2017. The councillors, the 6 councillors, we've just discussed it before, we raised the issue, we agreed on a submission as part of the process, and the development is considered as entirely inappropriate under Z15, and it causes an issue. It's not appropriate under Z15 because of this established community use. Just bear with me a minute, Arthur. I just want to give the entire picture.
I won't be bearing with you for a minute now.
Yeah, okay, 2 minutes would be great.
Oh.
Reasons and considerations.
Seriously now.
In terms of the CEO's report, he clearly stated the proposed development would therefore contravene materially a development objective indicated in the development plan for the zoning of land, quote, to protect and improve for community and institutional and community use, unquote. So, the CEO's own report to Bord Pleanála says this proposal is a contravention of our development plan. So for once, the officials and the councillors are in agreement on an issue like this. And finally, Ardvera, in relation to the inspectors in Bord Pleanála, and Bord Pleanála's report, I'm not going to read it out, but it's almost like an ideological position where the Bord Pleanála inspector is saying, look, the lands belong to the developer. It doesn't matter about community use. They can do as they please, because the lands are theirs. So it runs a coach and four, in summary, through our development plan, and we have to decide whether we're going to defend that plan or do something else with it. It's one of our key functions here as councillors. So that is why we, as the 6 Clontarf councillors, are pushing for a judicial review to get that view and see where we go to from here to reinforce, as I say, the primacy of the development plan that we approved. Thank you.
Councillor Heaney.
Councillor Murray has spoken in detail about the Z15 requirements, but one of the items or one of the paragraphs in our development plan, which we take a lot of time to produce, is that any development on Z15 land should protect existing sporting and recreational facilities which are available predominantly for community use. The Chief Executive Officer's report says there are 7 existing pitches consisting of 1 synthetic pitch, 1 GAA pitch, 2 rugby pitches, 3 soccer pitches. No details are provided of community use in the planning application. The Planning Authority's pre-application opinion on this proposal clearly indicated that the applicant must demonstrate that both the needs of the school and the community will be continue to be satisfactorily met on site, i.e. the retention of the main institutional and any local community uses such as local sports clubs must be met. That the development would be deemed not to be compliant with Z15 zoning should the applicant fail to adequately demonstrate that the lands of the proposed development are surplus to the requirements of the school and the local community. Despite numerous requests, the applicant has consistently failed to produce any figures on a club-by-club, slot-by-slot basis. Councillors, I am really concerned about the wider implications of this decision by An Bord Pleanála to what I believe completely disregard the very well thought out views of local politicians and more specifically the CEO of this establishment. The GAA state that they have no playing lands of their own and Clontarf GAA state they have no playing lands of their own and rely heavily on St Paul's College and Dublin City Council parks. They state that they have invested and developed the GAA pitches in St Paul's. They had the use of the GAA pitches all of the times outside school hours and the use of the rugby pitch on Saturday mornings from September to June. Clontarf Rugby Club state that they have used the pitches in St Paul's for years for 4 age groups and they use their own premises for different other teams. One of the comments from the inspector's report states that she went up to St Anne's Park one Sunday afternoon and found that there was nobody playing on the pitches. They don't play on the pitches at the particular time that she called up, so I find that really concerning. And I would urge the CEO, I accept that in terms of the Z15 zoning in our development plan, we've tried on a previous occasion to change the Z15 zoning and that brought us into the courts. But I think this is setting a precedent, and I think on the basis of the possible non-compliance with the EU legislation, particularly in relation to the Habitats Directive, that the CEO should obtain legal advice around the possible grounds there are for taking a judicial review on this planning application, because this is a serious precedent. It seems that the CEO of this City Council's opinion has been completely and utterly disregarded, and the wider implications for the rest of councillors on this City Council, I think, are just completely unknown, and we really need to make sure that we don't, I suppose, abdicate our responsibilities, certainly to sports clubs in the wider area. So I'd urge councillors to impress on the CEO the need to obtain legal opinion on whether or not there are good grounds to seek a judicial review, not to tell us that he's not going to seek a judicial review, but that he would seek legal opinion on the grounds for taking such a review. Gurmila Mahagat Ardvar.
Gurmagat and Collier Jane Horgan-Jones.
Thanks, Ardvera. I want to echo the comments of my colleagues that have gone before me and spoken about the need to preserve the principles governing the Z15 zoning requirement. Many of you have given up your time to come in and discuss this tonight, and the local ward councillors are grateful for it. As Councillor O'Murray indicated, it does look like a technical issue. It also looks like a local issue, but it very much isn't. And as Councillor Heaney said, it has wide-ranging implications for Z15 lands across the city, that developers may now be looking at the precedent set and feeling that they can lodge applications which are effectively applications more suited to a Z1 residential zoning requirement, and that An Bord Pleanála will ignore the many local submissions, the submissions of all the local councillors, and a categoric statement on behalf of the CEO of Dublin City Council that the application is in contravention of the development plan, and go ahead to grant permission without any modifications that in any way addresses any of the concerns that were raised. I think it is an insult that the inspector went out on what I understand was a Sunday and thought that was an accurate and reliable way of evaluating the community use of that area. It's simply no way of giving a fair representation to how much the community relies on those lands. And I want to just say one more thing in relation to the housing crisis and the need to build houses, and I think everybody here is in agreement that we need to do that. I'm trying desperately to buy a house at the moment. All I do every weekend is I go out and I view houses and get outbid on them all the time. But I don't want to see the erosion of Z15 lands that this development would mean, because I think some things need to be preserved and we need to have a longer term vision in terms of how they'll impact on our city if we go ahead on that basis. So I think the call for a legal opinion is well grounded. I am conscious that we are possibly running out of time in terms of exploring the judicial review option, and perhaps the law agent might advise us in terms of what the time limit is in terms of making an application to the High Court for leave, because I know the requirements for an SDZ type of, the strategic housing development types of applications I think are possibly different to the other requirements. So I think the Council need to be appraised very clearly of what the potential timeline is for this and how fast we can get our act together if that's what the Council indicates that they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ardvera. I'll try not to repeat what my colleagues have said. There is a big turnout here tonight of councillors because it does affect the whole city. I took out the maps from our development plan at the weekend and looked over the amount of Z15 that there is throughout the city, and it affects every constituency, every area. There's little spaces where schools or colleges could get an all-weather pitch in, but the rest of the land could be developed, and an awful lot of sporting organisations would lose out. Again, Z15, we're losing 7 pitches. They're not being renewed. I take great... the inspector going out at 1 o'clock on a Sunday, the 25th of February, maybe the inspector should have been in the Herald on the Monday and the Tuesday to see what matches were scheduled for St Anne's, because if I can remember back to 25th, there was a lot of pitches. Those weekends were called off due to bad weather. So maybe she should, I think it's a she should revisit that. Just on the CEO saying that he doesn't want to be part of a review, a judicial review. Well, I'm asking that that the City Council be part of this judicial review, because if he doesn't think that the document that he sent to us, or he sent to An Bord Pleanála, obviously what he wrote in it, he doesn't mean. So if our planning department and the CEO believe what they said in this document, they should go as to be part of the judicial review. Otherwise, as I said, I only came on the council late, so the development plan was well underway. It goes 18 months, the development plan goes on. It goes out for public consultation. It's viewed in libraries, City Hall, everybody, all the public have a chance to go in to view it, to make their submissions. As far as I'm concerned, if we let this go, our development plan is redundant. And not only that, but our planners, we don't think much of our planners in City Hall. We might as well let them go too, because Bord Pleanála, whatever, the Bord Pleanála are the new planning department for the City of Dublin, not only for the City of Dublin, but for the whole country. And tonight, I'm asking the City Council to be party to the judicial review that the residents are going to take. And the residents have gone out and raised money. It's going to cost them $25,000 just for the first part, and I'm asking the City Council to be part of that judicial review. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you for all the councillors for coming in tonight and members of the public. I contacted you all last night, I suppose, to tell you the importance of this. It's not just it's not just an issue out in our area, the Clontarf-Raheny area. It's an issue for the rest of the city. It's all the Z15 lands in the whole city. So thank you all for coming. I'm not going to repeat what everyone has said, but I'm going to make 2 or 3 points. The main points is, in our planning submission, our CEO said it is considered that the proposed residential development is not located on institutional lands which are surplus to requirements, and it has not been adequately demonstrated that the proposal secures the retention of the main community uses on the lands, including space for any necessary expansion of such uses. And our conclusion then was the proposed development is not considered to be consistent with the proper planning and sustainable development of the area. Now that as Councillor Sean Paul said, that has to mean something. What does that mean? Because An Bord Pleanála have totally disregarded this. They've totally disregarded all the views of the community. They've totally disregarded our development plan, and we have to now do something about that. And I know John mentioned, the Chief City Planner, that it was concluded that there was no reasonable grounds for a judicial review. Well, I suppose we're here tonight for some action, and it's getting late in the day. So who concluded that there was no reasonable grounds? Did the Senior Council conclude that? Did we get opinion? So who concluded that there was no reasonable grounds? I understand to get a judicial review we need an opinion first of all, and then we need leave then to get a judicial review, and I understand that that's decided by a High Court judge. And I think that's what this motion means, is that we want all possible steps, including seeking leave for a judicial review. That's what we want this council to go up before a judge and put our case before a judge. We believe we've got reasonable grounds, to put the reasonable grounds before and let him decide. Not us here, not with respect to yourselves, but let the judge decide whether we get a judicial review or not. And the community will have their one, and we should be doing our bit and not leaving it all to the people in the community. But again, we have to fight for this land, and we have to fight for a development plan. And there is time to do that, and that's it. And listen, thanks again for hearing me out, and thanks for coming in tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're not leaving yet, Damien. Councillor Cianán O'Moore. No, I should have said, Councillor O'Murray, you proposed the motion, is that right? Yeah. And are you seconding the motion, Councillor O'Moore? You're second on the... Yeah, okay. Councillor O'Moore.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Armara. Let's be quite clear about this. This special meeting tonight is not about bad planning decision in Raheny. It's about the government orchestrating Bord Pleanála to ignore and dismiss Dublin City Council and the people we represent. The government are putting pressure on Bord Pleanála because of the Rebuilding Ireland Housing Initiative. I'm calling on the Chief Executive to commence a judicial review under Order 84, the rules of the Superior Court, against An Bord Pleanála, the proposed development in St Anne's Park. The decision by Bord Pleanála is questionable, to say the least, due to the unlawfulness of the decision-making process. Numbers of examples can be given which demonstrate the elements of the decision which makes the process flawed. You yourself, Manager, on record as saying the application did not comply with the current zoning of land for institutional use. Back in 2016, Crevac Land Development withdrew an application for planning permission as they knew it would go straight to Bord Pleanála for permission at a later stage. This is wrong on so many levels. I'm not going to sit here tonight and give away into all the valid reasons for so long with the constraints there is on time. One straightforward example is on observation on the Brentgeese population. The environmental impact assessment was not followed. The officers that was assigned to carry out an audit on the playing fields, as others have said, did so in the middle of the season when it's off, and it's aching to send a school inspector in to count the children at primary school in the middle of July or August. This is very poor planning, and well calculated by An Bord Pleanála. In simple terms, Bord Pleanála did not comply with the laws of the land, therefore the decision is unlawful. This goes back to 2001, when Dublin City Council voiced concerns in relation to planning application for a fence to be erected by the Ficinians in the main avenue in the park due to a negative visual impact on the main avenue, and Bord Pleanála do not see any problems with this housing development on the same site that DCC had reservations about allowing them to put up a fence. DCC turned down the application to demolish 3 buildings and replace them with a sports hall and 2 all-weather floodlit sports pitches. Based on the mere fact Dublin City Council objected to the planning permission, Dublin City Council have to stand up and have their voice recognised. DCC have a moral and obligation to take the judicial review on behalf of the people of Dublin, on behalf of the members of the Council and on behalf of every unlawful planning decision that the Government may have hand in orchestrating. If Bord Pleanála are allowed to set this precedent, totally ignore the development plan, we may disregard the development plan may be thrown out the window. The coherent framework to ensure the city is developed in an inclusive way which improves the quality of life for its citizens is gone. The development plan is not just an idealistic document that sits in an office. The development plan should have a key influential view on the future of our city and what the government dictates to An Bord Pleanála. The plan provides agreed framework which gives expression to city economical, social, housing and cultural development. The plan is meant to have a crucial role in protecting the environment, the heritage and amenities across the city. If we are not successful to overturn this decision in this judicial review, we may say goodbye to Z15 in every area in Dublin. And furthermore, the local area plan for Clontarf is different to Raheny. Height-wise, it's totally different, and St Paul's College is actually in Raheny.
So we'll open it up now to the party list. So the first is the Sinn Féin group, and I think Councillor O'Toole is 2 minutes.
Thank you, Order. Well, every 5 years we in this chamber sit down for weeks and days and work out a development plan. We take it seriously. Every councillor here takes it seriously. We come up with what we consider the best plan for this city. And that includes, vitally includes, recreational and community facilities. Now, what An Bord Pleanála have done, one stroke of a pen, is tore that plan up. They've torn it up, Ardvera. And it's not just about sports facilities, about community facilities. I'm amazed to hear that the inspector went out and looked for football matches on a Sunday afternoon in February. And now I know there are football matches on Sunday afternoons, but the chances of going out in February with the climate we have and finding a football match on at that time of the year might be fairly slim. So that to me was just a very, very weak thing to put to us. Other councillors have mentioned this. This could have an enormous knock-on effect for the rest of the city, Lord Mayor. Because if you start this encroaching in on community and recreational facilities, we've lost the plot then. We've lost it. But, you see, it's down to this legislation where An Bord Pleanála now seem free to ride roughshod over anything we decide in this chamber. Sinn Féin will be supporting the motion to seek a judicial review. Thank you, Arvera.
Independent Group.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of the Independent Group, but I acknowledge that my views may not represent all of the group. I fully support the call for a judicial review. I think it's extremely important. The consequences of this decision could have far-reaching effects on communities all over Dublin. When we initially discussed this zoning issue in the previous development plan, there was 760 hectares of Z15 zone land. I'm not quite sure what it is currently, but it's very, very significant. Brief history lesson for people. In 2010, I submitted the motion to the previous development plan to remove residential from the Z15, precisely for the reasons that we're here today, the fear that it would be abused. The assurance given at the time by management as I suspected, weren't worth the paper they're written on, and we're paying the price now. Again, with the likes of the support of the Councillor Damien O'Farrell and other councillors, I had my motion passed and residential was removed from the development plan at the time. Ironically, some of the councillors who signed the motion for tonight's special meeting actually voted in favour of including residential in the development plan. In 2012, a poor High Court judgment against the council and in favour of the Sisters of Charity forced the reinsertion of residential into the ZED15. And the Sisters of Charity at the time were significant landowners wanting to maximise the value of their land. At the time, I asked the Law Department to challenge the judgment, but unfortunately, the majority of councillors chose the easy option and voted against the motion to appeal. Again, it was the likes of Councillor Damien O'Farrell, Pat Dunn, Braid Smith at the time who supported me. And I'm claiming that this blatant disregard by An Bord Pleanála for the Council's development plan in the St Paul's decision was facilitated by councillors allowing residential to be included in the ZED15 at that time. Other strategic housing developments at the moment, decisions made by An Bord Pleanála have also rode roughshod over their development plan by allowing 8 stories, for example, in my own area of Cabra, ignoring the manager's recommendation that it was too high, also allowing another student accommodation that managers recommended against. So with the An Bord Pleanála riding roughshod over our development plan, and with government ministers like Alan Kelly and Owen Murphy unilaterally lowering quality standards for apartments and proposing increased heights and densities, it calls into question what's the point of elected members, and we are elected members, actually producing a development plan. I think that's the question for today, and that's why I want this to be to support the call for a judicial review. Gurmagat.
Fianna Fáil Group.
I suppose what we have here is a conflict between democracy on one hand and dictatorship on the other. The democratic side of it stems from the local government planning and development legislation, from which we as councillors draw up our development plan, and when that goes out to submission and the general public are entitled to comment on it. So there's a huge democratic input on the development plan side, and then we've had the housing crisis and the strategic housing legislation, which has come in subsequent to that. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that this has been applied, certainly in the North Central area, and it has immediately created controversy and conflict between the democratic side and the way An Bord Pleanála have handled this. The difficulties that I see with the An Bord Pleanála, it's new legislation and it hasn't been interpreted. We really, you know, the 1963 local government planning and development legislation has been interpreted in numerous occasions by the courts, but this new legislation hasn't been. And it's these two pieces of legislation are now interacting together, and there is a clear conflict between them. And I would certainly support what Councillor O'Moore has said in relation to government policy pushing An Bord Pleanála, because they just seem to have thrown out every good planning reason and rationale in granting this particular grant of permission. What Councillor Mahan said as well, in addition to the inspector coming out in a February day, you know, on a Sunday at 1 o'clock when the weather was off, when the pitches were off, the clubs were all locked out, as I understand, from those sites as well, in addition, prior to Christmas. So they may have been out of habit of using the pitches by virtue of that fact as well. But I do think that we have this dictatorship by government with the new legislation. There is a housing crisis and nobody here denies that, but that doesn't mean we should rip up our development plan and, you know, throw it out. We really need a good solid interpretation of the new legislation, particularly how it interacts with the older legislation and our democratically arrived at development plan. Lord Mayor, I have to say on behalf of the Fianna Fáil Group, we are utterly behind any effort to get a judicial review of this and any other legal remedy that may be available to us, and I stress any other legal remedy. And what Councillor Heaney has suggested in relation to the Habitats Directive clearly, to my mind, would point to the direction in that, and I think that's probably our most fertile hunting ground. Gurmagat.
Fine Gael Group, I think Councillor Flanagan, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Like previous speakers, I would implored the CEO to explore the judicial review, and I would like to hear from the law agent tonight. I think that they really owe it to the city to pursue this. Also, the fast-track mechanism for the new legislation that just came in, it certainly shows a weakness in this, to think that a development of this scale can get the green light. Also, it's very disappointing that over 1,102 submissions were made, and very little, if any, of those submissions were taken on board in this very controversial decision from An Bord Pleanála. Likewise, with the Z15, this very much goes against the spirit of Z15 in the past, which was what for institutional and community gain and community use. This very much goes outside the remit of that. Like as previous speakers have said, it's paramount that the CEO pursues this. I do not buy what has been said there earlier, and as I say, I'd like to hear from the law agent this evening to give us a vote of confidence in exploring the way forward on this. Thank you.
Labour Party, I think Councillor Moynihan had indicated, is that right? No?
Gilliland.
Sorry, Councillor Gilliland. Okay.
I don't want to make a speech. I have a question, just a question in relation to legal advice. I think somebody else wants to speak in it, yeah, but I just have a question. Thanks.
Grandma Gaderver, like my fellow councillors, I'm appalled at the lack of consideration that An Bord Pleanála has taken for the decision that was made by this council. That was a very considered decision after much debate. I think we had 2 meetings that looked in detail at this planning. I absolutely reject the idea that An Bord Pleanála can take a wider view of and use St Anne's Park as the requirement for recreation on this site. I also reject the idea that the gym is considered recreation when it is it's not a public facility, it's private and it's operated at the will of the school. I absolutely reject the pathetic attempt to verify the use of the pitches. One visit, like, I'm sorry, like in all officialdom, at least 5-6 visits should have been done. And I reject the lack of democracy. We made a decision here, over 1,000 local people also made a decision and took the time to object to this. So I think for me, this appalling decision is an example of misguided government direction. It gives An Bord Pleanála a dictatorial role in planning. I think the approach to somehow ameliorating the housing crisis by a fast-track process that doesn't take into consideration the sustainable development of communities is appalling. But most importantly, the precedent that this sets to use Z15 land wholly for residential is very, very dangerous. I can see down the line, particularly with the powers that An Bord Pleanála now have, that this will happen again and again and again. And we will lose our recreational space, our green space, and we will just have houses thrown up willy-nilly. The Labour Party stands fully behind this motion, and I think we as a council need to take a stand and be seen to take a stand to protect not only our development plan but sustainable community development in the next years. Thank you.
People before profit.
Thanks, Ardvara. I do think, you know, sometimes I wonder in this chamber, like, what were we here for? You know, one of the few powers that we have as elected members is the drafting of a development plan. And it is a process that goes on for a period of time, and it's, you know, they're long days, and we set in place what we think is a guiding vision for the City of Dublin, and it's just been all set aside with this decision made by An Bord Pleanála. And I think it's incumbent upon our planning department and our CEO, in order to maintain their professional integrity, to actually challenge this decision by way of judicial review. It has to happen. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Are we just going through these different processes so that they can be unilaterally voided, set aside? And just what, you know, so I would think if we do pass this motion, and again, this speaks to also a lack of actual democracy or input from elected members. If we do pass this motion, will it actually be implemented? Will we be instructing the CEO
to seek judicial review, or will it just be passed and just sit there on the table enacted? So that's a question that I have. But in terms of the actual development plan and the fact that we have a housing crisis, the development plan does state that we have 440 hectares of actually zoned residential land that has the capacity to provide nearly 30,000 houses, 29,500. So there is plenty of land out there, appropriately zoned land that can and should be built upon, but it's just not happening. Land prices are very high and it's been hoarded at the moment. And it is part, I think, also of just a disastrous, I think, by Fine Gael housing policy over the last number of years, where they seem to be moving from one poor decision with regard to housing to another poor decision. So the Strategic Housing Development Plan, which is basically obviating the need for the Planning Authority and going straight to An Bord Pleanála if the units are more than 100 in any one development, is literally another attack on local government. Every councillor put in a submission. Over 1,000 submissions were made by what is a fantastic Isle of St Anne's campaign. Some of the members are here this evening. I welcome them. Like a really strong community-based campaign. And all that's been set aside. All their ideas and opinions have been set aside, and I think that's a dangerous precedent as well. Just a couple of things, and I'll finish on this, Chair. I do think there is an issue here, and the manager's report clearly stated it, that the applicant didn't demonstrate sufficiently that there were enough alternative feeding grounds for the Brent geese. So we actually are in contravention of the EU Habitats Directive, and that is a legal matter. We need to ensure, as a Dublin Bay biosphere, that we protect the biosphere, of which the Brent geese and the feeding grounds are an integral part. So I'm at a loss as to know why we're not actually seeking a judicial review. And I think if it doesn't happen here, again, I think it's going to fall back in the community to once again save Dublin City from bad planning decisions. But I fully support the motion, and I thank you for your generosity, Chair.
As we debate this evening, Lord Mayor, there are people driving home to their families in Courtown, in Carlow and in Cavan. And these long-distance commuters are forced to live hours away from their jobs. And in the middle of a housing crisis, I'd much prefer if special meetings of this Council were focused on housing delivery rather than reviewing An Bord Pleanála's decisions. Of course we need playing fields, and these 7 pitches are well used, and of course we need to protect communities and safeguard the geese. However, judicial review is expensive and time-consuming, and I think we've spent far too much time in this Council getting second legal opinions on issues that we don't agree with. I don't believe we should go to the courts. Instead, I agree with the Chief Executive that we should examine our development plan and vary it if it is deemed necessary. And that's a power we do have. And I don't think that lawyering up is the answer to the decisions that we don't agree with. I'd much prefer to be focusing on building on land in the city, at Broadstone Bus Station, in Cahill Barracks in Rathmines, on underused rail yards at Houston and North Docks, on lands at the Dublin Industrial Estate, on the Archbishop's land in Drumcondra, and delivering the housing that we need in vibrant, mixed-use communities. And I think that's where this Council should be putting its effort on, rather than querying the decisions of An Bord Pleanála. Thank you.
Left Technical Group.
Well, the point has been made that the decision of An Bord Pleanála compromises the integrity of the development plan process, but I would contend that the integrity of the development plan process was compromised around St Anne's and St Paul's 2 years ago, in the middle of the process itself, when I brought a motion seeking to de-zone the land in question from Z15 to Z9 amenity to make it effectively indistinguishable from St Anne's Park itself. And without any prior warning, because that motion was on the floor days in advance, at the 11th hour, at the request of a councillor in here, the legal officer said that those of us who would vote in favour of that, if we represented a majority, would be liable to be sued by the developer. And what the implications of that is that, during the development plan process, we may only rezone land to the benefit of the developer. That is the implication, and we cannot do otherwise, or else just leave land effectively alone. That is the implication there. Now, there's been a certain emphasis, certainly in the local meetings that have taken place, that have been very well attended. The meeting in Clontarf Castle Hotel last week about the unanimity amongst the public representatives locally, not just in the Clontarf ward, but across the North Central area, including the 9 councillors in Beaumont, Donaghmede. That's fine insofar as it goes, but there are political decisions that lie behind the situation that we find ourselves now, and a lack of political intervention, certainly at Dáil and ministerial level. I mean, it was mentioned in passing that the Department of Education had an input into this decision, saying that they had no fundamental objection to the rezoning. I do question whether that decision to put that submission on behalf of the Department of Education went in front of the Minister, who happens to be a local Fine Gael TD as well. I'd be very interested in that, and I think I see the basis for some parliamentary questions to that end. I agree with the legal strategy that has been proposed in the motion, but I'd say don't put all our eggs in that basket. I think we got a glimpse of the potential for a very big people power campaign, which can be a source of serious political pressure. It is a local park in one sense, but it's Dublin City Council's premier park as well, and again I would say to the Fianna Fáil colleagues, that make it part of the confidence and supply negotiations. Why wouldn't you? Because if we lose it for good. And just a final point I would make in response to the speaker previous to myself. I have no compunction about opposing this, because the housing that they propose to build on this is beyond the means of mere mortals. It's beyond the means of those with a genuine housing need. We're talking about extremely high-end stuff. Look at the drawings. We're talking about €1 million apartments here. So there's nothing. We don't have any skin in this game from the point of view of resolving the housing crisis when it comes to this piece of land. Thanks.
So 2 other speakers indicated. We've gone through the party list. So Councillor Burke and Councillor Moynihan and Councillor Ring. Okay, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, I'm wondering where the Dáil elected members for this North Bay constituency are and where they stand in relation to this. We have 2 ministers there, both of whom were involved in bringing in the legislation, taking away the powers from Dublin City Council, who would never have granted planning permission for this. And they have also, by the way, appointed the members of An Bord Pleanála. And I don't think that was a democratic decision. It was a ministerial decision who would be appointed there. So I beg the question, and I know I'm sticking my neck out here a bit, as to why the Department of Education in one particular case decided that there should be no objection to the use of these lands. I think it's a disgrace. It's a matter for the people of Raheny and North Bay to decide on whether they're adequately represented by their TDs. I might be bringing the debate down a little bit in that regard, but I think it's important to call a spade in this particular case. Virtually all of the councillors here are in favour of a judicial review being brought by the Chief Executive. I can't understand Councillor Cuffe. I'm sure he's well aware of the fact that there is sufficient land zoned for housing in this city for 50,000 units of accommodation without going into Z15. So why he brought that up, I don't know. It's a smoke screen, and I'm very disappointed that he did that. All I can say is, where are our TDs? Thank you.
Councillor Moynihan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just ask, at the time that we took the court case on the initial Z15 court case, we had the legal advisors at that stage come into us and give us an enclosed camera session on that. So can I ask 2 things? One, can we get access to the legal advice here in relation to a judicial review? And 2, if we can't, can we get somebody in a closed session to come in and explain it to us, talk us through it, and talk us to the potential points that we may take? Thanks.
Councillor Ring.
First of all, I think I'm speaking, one, as a local resident, although I'm not a councillor for the area, and from that point of view, I have to thank the likes of Councillor Damien O'Farrell and the other councillors who kept the local residents up to date on what's going on. I have 4 sons. All of them played on those pitches through the soccer club, which has no permanent facilities at all. Obviously, the GAA have a couple of pitches, but need the additional facilities, and the rugby. And at 1 o'clock on a Sunday, I've stood on the side of all those pitches, and sometimes you'd be there at 1 o'clock on a Sunday, and there would be hundreds, literally hundreds of children in the nursery inside the main gates on the pitch on the right, match going on the left, Gaelic match up in the other pitches. I actually played on the synthetic pitch before my brilliant career came to an end many years ago. But however, so Bord Pleanála disregarding the established community use just beggars belief in this. And I believe from talking to local councillors that they won't sit back and accept the attack on our development plan. The local sports clubs will certainly not accept the attack on the just taking away of their facilities. And when I think of the Department of Education, surely we should be providing more pitches so that this obesity problem we have, childhood obesity, can be tackled, and no one's thinking of that. Take away 7 pitches. The hundreds and hundreds of people that's depriving of a chance to exercise, etc., just seems to have been ignored. But most of all, I think the local residents and communities won't accept this. And I believe Dublin City Councillors, and we are, I believe, have indicated that we will stand up to An Bord Pleanála. We're calling on the management here to do the right thing and stand up to Bord Pleanála, take out this judicial review and defend our Dublin City development plan. It's Dublin's plan and it's for the future of Dublin, and we have to defend both. Gurmagat Ordwera.
Gurmagat and Collier Rory McKinley.
Gurmagat Ordwera. Just a couple of points. I mean, it strikes me, the decision is so fundamental that it would justify a judicial review, because otherwise we're saying we may as well tear up the development plan. So we either defend it, and a judicial review isn't an overly dramatic manoeuvre. It's time consuming, but it's not at the upper end. I'm at a slight disadvantage, and I don't know whether that's my own fault or not. I mean, I don't have a copy of the manager's report that he read. Which is the one that
was read tonight.
Yeah. So it's a bit hard to form a full view, to be honest, Orverda. The other point, of course, that's of more germane to us is what we should be doing to the development plan, because clearly this changes the landscape, and I think the members may have taken some different decisions 2 years ago. So there are some serious points, and I do think that the CEO, if it is the will of the council to pursue a judicial review, I seriously think that there are plenty of legal grounds to do that. Thank you.
Gurmagat, I'll ask the before I actually ask the managers to come in, just to say briefly for myself, I do support the motion. In relation to Councillor Cuffe's points, I think what Councillor Cuffe has called for in terms of a huge acceleration in the housing programme and identifying sites and so on, I mean, the majority in this council, the vast majority I believe, have repeatedly called for that. And we know that the main obstacle to that is central government. If this government was really serious about the housing crisis and coming up with an emergency approach and fast tracking and so on, well, it would be done to facilitate exactly what Councillor Cuffe has described and to provide the social and affordable housing that's needed. But that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're truncating the planning process. They're further marginalising communities and elected representatives and even council planners from the whole process. And that is not a contribution to the housing crisis. In fact, it's a further erosion of local democracy. It's a further erosion of proper planning. And that's, I believe, why, above and beyond the specifics of this site, that this is being challenged here by councillors, and why councillors are seeking for it to be reviewed judicially. So I'll just bring in the managers to address some of the questions.
Thank you, Ardvera. I suppose, given the contributions this evening, could I suggest that initially I seek council opinion on whether there are any grounds on which we might succeed in a judicial review, and then following on from that also seek legal opinion as to whether there are further options and refinements to the Z15 policy which may be made which will ensure community facilities on institutional lands are retained insofar as is legally possible. We'll see if the members are agreeable to that.
Okay, Councillor O'Murray.
Sorry, I just welcome the manager's response there, but time is of the essence here because the clock is ticking. I think it would be very useful to get an opinion from the law agent as to what timelines we're working towards, and we need to, manager, you're going to have to knit it all together to make sure we get over time hurdles to get us there on time. So I think you know, an opinion from the law agent on time frame is crucial in this regard.
Councillor Flanagan.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I second that. I'd be very interested in getting an overview from the law agent on the process now. Thank you.
Councillor Heaney.
No, I'm concerned, and I appreciate the response from the Assistant CEO, but I would prefer that we seek legal opinion on the first item. The second item can wait. We're under time pressure here. We need to get legal advice forthwith on whether or not there's a ground, which I believe there is, on whether we can judicially review this decision. The issue on around how we can tweak our development plan in relation to Z15 lands going forward is something we have to look at in any event. That's for future planning applications or future permissions given by An Bord Pleanála, but this is the one in relation to the Z15 lands in St Paul's and at St Anne's Park. So I would propose, Ordver, that we go with the first line of the manager's suggestion.
Okay, we're going to hear the law agent first.
The advice can be sought as to whether or not there are adequate grounds for a judicial review. That advice can be got, I believe, very quickly, and we would have until the 23rd of May in which to lodge our application for a judicial review.
Okay, briefly, these are just clarification points. I'm not looking for speeches again. So, Councillor O'Farrell and Councillor Moynihan.
You know, I just think this is a problem we're continually having. We get in second legal opinions, but it's your second legal opinion. It's not ours, it's not the council's. And I would like us to take a judicial review and let a judge decide. So instruct lawyers to put a case forward and let the judge decide. Can we not do that? Because I think that's what this motion means. Seeking leave for judicial review. So you would instruct a senior counsel to prepare a case and give it to the judge and let him decide whether we get a judicial review or not. Because I don't think we have the time to be getting an opinion and going back and forth. Like, can we not get an opinion that what we want, that would agrees with us, that we go forward with a judicial review? I don't see what the problem is about that.
Lord Mayor, I mean, we've had a very, I think, useful debate here. I came into this meeting, and as Richard indicated, I was not minded because I didn't think we had to. But having listened to the members, as the Assistant Chief Executive said, he's now intent on getting legal advice on whether we have sufficient grounds to sustain a judicial review. Now, I think that's a reasonable outcome. We have time to do it and to report back to this meeting. Ultimately, and the legal situation is my decision, but having listened to the debate, I think the view is we should go that step and then we'll report back. Clearly, if the legal opinion says we don't have sufficient grounds, there's an implication. If it says we have very strong grounds, it is. So, you know, I think that's a reasonable way forward. We have time to do it, and I think we should go ahead and do that.
Okay. Is that agreed? Agreed. Just in relation to the manager's report, I think that should be distributed to the membership, and also it will be in the minutes of this special meeting, which will go before the next council meeting on the 14th of May, and the issue can be addressed there, and that will be in advance of the 23rd of May deadline. So is that okay?
Yeah, we just put the motion, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, is the motion agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Sorry, this motion is agreed.
Motion is agreed.